Hi there, this is Chris, Chap in the Cup, Motor Legends. Now today, almost unbelievably, the temperature is forecast here in the UK to reach almost 40 degrees. And so we thought it might be appropriate to talk about how you can stay cool when riding the bike. As motorcyclists, especially here in the UK, we expend a lot of time, money and effort in trying to find ways to stay warm and dry on the bike. And that's obviously understandable because particularly here in the UK, the weather can be pretty miserable. And there's nothing worse than riding when you're soaking wet with the rain and you're shivering from the cold. And of course, those two are connected, the wet and the cold. Rarely is it fun riding in extremely cold conditions, but when you add the wet to that, what you have to understand is that we lose body heat 30 times faster to a wet environment than to a dry one. So in those conditions when it's cold and we're getting wet, hypothermia is never that far away. And so that's why as motorcyclists we go to great lengths to find ways of insulating us, to insulate our body heat when we're riding along. So we're talking about membranes of some sort, laminated membranes or drop lining membranes to keep that heat in, merino base layers, downfill jackets perhaps, even heated gear. And as a result of this, most bikers in the UK end up with this kind of gear in their wardrobes. But as any experienced motorcyclist recognises, there's no jacket, there's no pant, there's no glove nor boot that's going to work in all conditions. Sadly, that garment just not exists. If it did, I can assure you I'd be lying on a beach in Guadeloupe rather than sweating my nuts off in a shop here in Guildford. The problem is that the gear that we have acquired to protect us from this inclement weather becomes a liability when the temperature rises to the kind of temperatures, for example, that we're expecting today. Getting hot, of course, is not just uncomfortable. It's just as much an impediment to riding safely as is getting cold on the bike. Now, many years ago, I did the Baja 1000. I wasn't a competitor, obviously, I went as a tourist, but one day I thought I would show off. I'd put on a bit of Steve McQueen style. I decided to ride with my Barber International jacket. Going was quite hard, and after a few hours I started to lose it because I was wearing a jacket that just didn't breathe, and I didn't realise at the time, but I was getting hotter and hotter. I was becoming dehydrated. I reached the stage where after a while, as I was riding down the track, if there was a rock over there about 50 yards, I would veer off, drive towards it and hit it. Basically, I'd lost so much liquid, I'd become delirious. Now, luckily the guides recognised this. They got some water down me, they gave me some electrolytes, and I recovered fairly quickly. But the issue is that overheating is something very much to be avoided. The question is, what can we do about it? When it's hot, really, really hot, the last thing you want to be wearing is anything that incorporates a membrane. Now, a laminated membrane, such as you get in a rucker jacket or a Stadler jacket, may vent a little bit better than a drop liner jacket. But the fact is that any membrane is going to impede our ability to sweat. And sweating is the body's natural way of cooling itself down. So when we sweat, moisture comes to the surface of the skin. That moisture turns from a liquid state into a gaseous state. And that exchange in states from the liquid to the gas, that requires energy. And the creation of that energy draws heat out of the body. And that's how sweating cools the body down. But the essential component there is that the vapour must be able to escape. And if it cannot escape, it stays in its liquid state. So we end up just getting wetter and wetter. We don't actually cool down. The problem is that anything with a membrane is going to impede the rate at which the sweat can escape from our bodies. So simply put, we cannot stay cool in hot conditions if we're wearing anything with a membrane. The other problem, of course, is that a waterproof membrane is also a windproof membrane. So when you're wearing anything with a membrane, that is going to prevent the oncoming cooling air from reaching the body to cool us down. Now, you might think that because your jacket has loads of vents, this doesn't apply to you. But even if you have the best laminated jacket with loads of zips, with loads of direct venting, you're only mitigating the problem. That problem being the presence of a membrane in the first place. The bottom line is that if you're somewhere hot, if you're riding somewhere hot, or if you're working up a sweat somewhere, you need to keep away from anything with a membrane. Leave your waterproof gear at home. Unfortunately, a leather jacket, something like these, even though most leather jackets don't have a waterproof membrane, they're not going to be much better. A leather jacket isn't the solution in hot weather. Of course, there are lots of different types of leather jacket. You can get leather jackets with mesh linings, and they're going to be better than leather jackets with fixed cotton linings. You can get lightweight leather jackets made from something like kangaroo leather or goat leather, and they are going to be cooler than a jacket made from a thick cowhide. You can find leather jackets with perforated panels, and they're going to be better than leather jackets that don't have perforations. But none of these factors are going to overcome the main basic weakness of leather, and that is that leather just doesn't breathe very well. Imagine you're going out on a blisteringly hot day. You decide to set off and walk the South Downs Way or some similar rural path. You wouldn't think of doing that in a leather jacket because you would know that you're going to overheat, you're going to get sweaty, it's going to be uncomfortable. Well, things are no different on a motorbike. If it's hot, you want to be able to sweat, and if you wear a leather jacket, you will simply overheat. Staying cool on the bike in hot weather is all about breathability. We need to be wearing a jacket, for example, that breathes really well for all the reasons that we've already discussed. It needs to breathe so that the sweat can escape, so that sweat can pass into the atmosphere. And we need it to breathe or to vent so that the oncoming air can reach our bodies and cool ourselves down. Now, as ever, in extreme heat or extreme cold, we need to keep the core at a stable temperature. And when we keep the core cool in hot weather, we stand a better chance of the rest of the body staying cool. The best thing we can wear in these conditions is a mesh jacket of some description. Now, these jackets are 10 a penny and often don't cost a lot more. The issue is that most mesh jackets are not particularly strong. They're not really very protective. And if you go out and spend £100, £150 on a mesh jacket, you should not expect to achieve the highest levels of protection because frankly, you are not going to get them. These jackets are designed to flow air and not to do a lot more. They are not designed for high-speed riding. Now, there are some exceptions, of course, and this is one of them. This is the Rucker Force Air. There is nothing out there that flows more air. It's got a knitted construction rather than the normal woven construction you get with a motorcycle jacket, and when you knit the fabric, you get twice as much air flowing through it. And in the case of this jacket, every single panel flows air. Now, much as we rate the Rucker Force Air jacket, perhaps our favourite high airflow jacket is this jacket, the Klim Marrakesh. I'm wearing that jacket and that's also the same jacket. The chassis is woven from 1,000 denier cordura, and that's a pretty impressive weight of cordura. Bear in mind that a Rucker jacket will often have a 650 denier, sometimes a 750, very occasionally an 850 denier cordura. So this is a strong jacket. Then has woven into the fabric a degree of elastane to make it a bit more comfortable and stretchy. Overall, it makes for what is almost undoubtedly the most comfortable AA rated jacket that money can buy. AA rating on a mesh jacket is almost unheard of. Remember also that the Rucker Kingsley, which was a jacket that Rucker made specifically for the UK police, that's also AA rated. Now, like the Rucker Force Air, the Klim Marrakesh flows air through every single panel, so down the sleeves, all across the front, all across the back. In the margin, we would concede, I suppose, that the Rucker Force Air flows a little bit more air because that jacket's knitted construction as opposed to this jacket's woven construction means that it allows more air to pass through it. But the Rucker Force Air doesn't look as good in our view, it's not as nice and comfortable to wear, and of course, crucially, it's not as protective. Of course, the problem with any high airflow jacket is that it's going to be less effective when the temperature drops. But for us here at Motor Legends, that's not a problem. We just layer up accordingly. In fact, these days we tend to use the Marrakesh as the starting point for what we ride in all year round. So on a day like today, when it's hot, we just wear this as an airflow jacket. When it's a little bit chillier, say we're coming home from a ride in the evening, we'll put a very thin windproof layer beneath it. Klim does a lovely one called the Klim Zephyr. If it's somewhat colder, we'll then put a down jacket beneath this. So with those three items, you can ride pretty much in all conditions. Of course, if it rains, this jacket's going to be no good. No airflow jacket's going to be any good in the rain. So what you then do is wear a waterproof over the top. Obviously, we've got the Scott, and we think that's the best that money can buy. And in our view, this is the way to go. You're going to be properly equipped, whatever conditions you find yourself in. But even so, there's one thing that we have to accept. What we wear is only going to have so much of a bearing on how we feel on the bike. And if the temperatures are going to be up in the upper 30s and even reaching the 40s as they go into today, it doesn't matter what we're wearing. You are going to get hot. And in those conditions, the solution is going to be to wear something like a cooling vest, the Macna cooling vest. You fill that with liquid, and as that liquid evaporates, it uses evaporative cooling, rather like sweating, and it's going to draw heat away from the body. So when it's really hot, no clothing that you're going to wear is going to make any difference. You need a cooling vest. Now, rarely is a cooling vest going to be applicable in the UK. We are going through some very exceptional times right now, but if you are going to be riding anywhere that's hotter than hell, it's a cooling vest that you need. When it comes to our lower halves, our motorcycling trousers, our motorcycling pants, I think we can write off anything, once again, that is made of leather, and we can write off anything that is made or constructed with a waterproof membrane. I think we can also do the same with anything that has a fixed lining of some description. So I'm afraid that counts out what is known as a line jean or a Kevlar jean. Now, Kevlar jeans come in all shapes and sizes, and dependent upon the percentage of Kevlar that the denim is lined with, they can be very protective. But all Kevlar jeans have one thing in common. They are lined, by definition. They are lined with Kevlar. And that's not what you want to be wearing when it's hot. After all, nobody wakes up on a Sunday morning, opens the curtains and goes, it's a lovely day, I'm going to go out for a ride on the bike, where are my favourite lined trousers? Some historically, of course, have assumed that Kevlar jeans were the coolest thing to ride in because A, they're jeans, I suppose, and B, they don't have a membrane. But actually, any pant with a heavy padded lining is not going to be something you want to go riding in the hot weather. Now for us, the solution is a jean, but it's what we call a single layer jean. Now these jeans have no lining. They achieve their strength by combining the cotton with a stronger material. At the lower end of the market, that might be with Cordura. So these jeans are lovely, light to wear, flow a lot of air, but they're not necessarily particularly strong. They're not particularly expensive either. At the higher end of the market, we wrap the cotton around a super strong material, something like a UHM WPE, which is an ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. Now, jeans made in this way can be much stronger than leather, but the beauty of a single layer jean is that it's going to flow air like a pair of regular Levi's. So they're going to be super cool to ride in and incredibly comfortable to walk around in when you get off the bike. Now, our favourite jeans are made by the Swiss company Roka, this company, but people like Spidey, people like Dainese, PMJ and Belstaff make single layer jeans, as increasingly do a number of other manufacturers. Now, there are mesh trousers also on the market, and one might contend that these trousers actually flow even more air than a pair of single layer jeans, and in some cases that will be the case. But these jeans can look a little bit strange off the bike because often they have a very wide leg, although I concede that they would be perfect probably if you're riding off-road. So let's now talk about the other components within a motorcyclist wardrobe that can make a contribution towards you riding more coolly in hot weather. Starting point, I suppose, has got to be base layers. A good base layer will help wick moisture away from the body. And as we've said on a number of occasions, that's an important part of staying cool. The moisture's got to come to the surface of the skin, turn into vapor and escape. A lightweight merino is probably the best form of base layer. We're talking about something, this is the merino from Icebreaker. Icebreaker are perceived to make the best merino, but we're talking about something that's of a weight of maybe 100 grams, 150 grams. Next up would be a synthetic. Synthetic's not quite as good as merino in some respects, but it will do the basic job of helping moisture escape from the body, of wicking moisture away. Importantly, avoid anything in cotton, and that's because cotton is made up of long yarn fibres, and long yarn fibres, when they get wet, they don't wick moisture away, they absorb them. And you will know this if ever you've played sport, played football in a cotton t-shirt, it just gets very wet. And what that means is the water is not escaping, it's just being absorbed by the garment. When it comes to gloves, again, we're going to want to avoid anything with a membrane. That is to say, we want a pure summer glove, and that is an example of a pure summer glove. So an outer chassis, no membrane. Quick recap on gloves in case some people don't understand what a summer glove is. There are three kinds of glove on the market. There's a winter glove. Clearly that's not pertinent here, but a winter glove has a membrane and some insulating material. The most common glove, the glove that most people have, however, is what we call a summer waterproof glove. And this is the glove that most of us will wear from, say, April through until the end of October. Outer chassis with just a membrane. But in hot weather, we don't want that membrane near our hand, so we do not want a summer waterproof glove in temperatures that are going to be 30 plus. We want a glove that is a pure summer glove with nothing inside the outer chassis. Now, there are lots of summer gloves on the market. Some are made from leather, some from textile materials, some are perforated, some have vents. Some, like the Held Desert gloves I have in mind, are particularly protective, but you've got to be careful because some summer gloves are just not very protective. If you go out and buy a £20 pair of summer gloves, then if you go down, and when we go down we always put our hands out, you're not going to have a lot by way of protection. So you can be too economical in some ways when it comes to summer gloves. As far as boots are concerned, I think the first thing you need to do is look at a short boot. Yes, there is a bit of trade-off in terms of safety, but a short boot is going to be much cooler to wear than a tall boot because a tall boot is going to trap hot air around the lower part of the foot. You're going to get sweaty. A short boot is always just going to be nicer to wear when you get off the bike. The problem is, in terms of waterproofing, the UK distributors and manufacturers have historically not bought many non-waterproof boots into the UK, and that's understandable considering our climate. In fact, historically they have been thought to be almost unsaleable. But I believe that is changing, and increasingly we are having conversations with the distributors and importers about bringing non-waterproof boots into the UK market. And that's partly because there are new people coming into the market who are taking up motorcycling who seem ever more determined not to go out in the rain. So I think over time we will see that there will be more non-waterproof boots on the market. Right now, our favourite non-waterproof short boot is this one from Klim. It's called the Klim Ridgeline. It's a lovely boot. It's got a fur lacing system, but importantly, the whole boot's going to flow air in the way that just wouldn't be the case if it were a waterproof boot. The last bit of kit that we need to look at, in some ways it's the most important bit of kit, is the helmet. Now, the obvious option here is to go for an open face helmet. Nothing's going to flow as much cool air across the face as an open face helmet. In other words, something like that. But what you have to understand is that with an open face helmet, you have absolutely no protection. And if you go down and you're wearing an open face helmet, you stand a chance of losing your chin. Now, this was brought home to me recently. I had an accident. It was actually on the track, but I wasn't going particularly fast. I was doing probably 30 miles an hour. When an accident happens, you have no control on what's going to happen. And what happened actually was when I came to, or I'd realised what had gone on, I had scraped the whole of the chin bar of my full face helmet. Now, clearly I couldn't have worn an open face helmet on the track, but if I'd had that accident on the road, I would have had no chin. It would have been horribly painful. There would have been expensive, time-consuming surgery involved. It would not have been a pleasant experience. And that's why at times we are not massively keen on open face helmets. Yes, they have a role, but if you're riding at proper speeds on the open road, I don't think an open face helmet is the way to go. What we prefer is something like this. This is the Shoei X0, and it's in fact exactly the same helmet in many respects as the Shoei JO, the helmet next to it. That's the open face helmet. The difference is that this has a chin bar. So you can still get loads of airflow across the face, maybe not quite as much as an open face, but you're going to get a lot of air in. But if things do go wrong, your chin is going to be protected. You could conceivably create the same kind of thing by just taking any adventure helmet and taking the visor off. Adventure helmets tend to have this longer nose, which means that they're just a little bit cooler to wear because you're not going to get that hot air right up against your face. So with that longer chin bar, they tend to allow the air to be expelled more easily. They are cooler to wear. Take the visor off and you're going to create basically one of those. Another helmet that can work well in hot conditions is this kind of helmet. In other words, a flip lid helmet. We don't advocate riding with this chin bar up at speed because why would we? That would make it basically an open face helmet. But certainly what I do if I'm in town and I'm doing 20-30 miles an hour and it's a hot day, I will raise it just to get air on the face. Similarly, if I'm traveling abroad, if I'm riding through France on the back roads, it's a hot day. When I come to a village and suddenly I'm in a 40-kilometre zone or a 50-kilometre zone, I'll lift the chin bar, I'll ride through it at slow speed. I think that's a justifiable risk. When I come out of the village and I need to pick up speed again, I would just bring it down. So a flip lid helmet can most definitely allow you to get some cooler air into the helmet to cool yourself down. So let me try and sum all this up. I remember reading somewhere that there is never bad weather. It's never too wet, it's never too cold, it's never too hot. All there is inappropriate clothing. Now, here in the UK, we spend a lot of time obsessing about the cold and the wet, and justifiably perhaps. But that is why we tend to buy gear that is intended to keep us warm and dry. And normally what that is going to mean is buying a suit of some description, a waterproof suit. But it simply doesn't rain every day. The weather seems to be getting warmer, and increasingly bikers are doing their utmost to avoid riding in the rain. And I indeed am that kind of rider. All of which means that the traditional waterproof suit is becoming ever less appropriate. When it gets really hot, you do not want to be wearing waterproof gear. At least you don't if you want to be riding comfortably and riding safely. The key to this comes down to one word: breathability. When it's hot, you need gear that is going to breathe.